My millionaire husband called me sterile in front of everyone in court. His goal, to annul our marriage and keep his millions. He claimed a clause would leave me with nothing if we divorced. I stayed calm and placed an envelope in the judge's hands. The revelation inside shocked everyone present. The glass walls of our penthouse were supposed to be windows, but they always felt like mirrors. They did not show me Manhattan, a city humming with life 28 floors below. They showed me only the reflection of a 32-year-old woman waiting in a silent, beige room. The apartment was a masterpiece of minimalist design, which is to say it was cold, full of sharp edges and empty surfaces. Christian had called it clean. I called it hollow. Tonight, the reflection showed me in the dove-gray dress he'd bought me, my hair pulled back in the smooth, uncomplicated style he preferred. I was, as I so often was, waiting. The apartment was silent save for the faint, expensive hum of the climate control system. Christian was late. Again. This was not a rare occurrence, it was the baseline of our marriage. His work was his priority, his passion, his true spouse. I was something else. An acquisition. A beautiful piece of art he'd hung in his stark, expensive home. When he'd proposed 3 years ago on this very balcony, the ring a blinding weight on my hand, I hadn't seen the cage being built around me. I had seen Christian Morrison, 6 feet 2 inches of salt and pepper charisma, a man whose smile could melt glaciers and whose eyes promised a future so bright it was blinding. He had swept me off my feet, an events coordinator at a boutique hotel, and lifted me into a life where the wine cost more than my monthly rent and the guest lists read like a Forbes magazine index. I thought I had won the lottery. Only later did I realize I had simply been purchased. I traced the rim of a wine glass, the liquid a deep, untouched ruby. We were supposed to be celebrating. Celebrating what, I wasn't even sure. A deal he'd closed? A Tuesday? With Christian, the reasons were always vague and business-related. The real, personal milestones were the ones we glossed over. My hand drifted, as it often did, to my abdomen. The ache to start a family had grown from a whisper to a constant, dull roar. It was the one thing I truly wanted, the one thing that might finally fill this vast, empty space with something real. But every time I brought it up, Christian would deploy that masterful charm, deflecting with the skill of a seasoned diplomat. "Darling, of course," he'd said just last month, kissing my forehead without meeting my eyes. "But the market is volatile. Let's just wait until the Q4 projections are in. Then we can really focus." Before that, it was the expansion into Tokyo. Before that, our trip to Paris. There was always another trip, another deal, another quarter. His excuses were a fortress, and I was beginning to realize they weren't designed to protect our future. They were designed to keep me out. I walked to the vast, state-of-the-art kitchen, a place where I'd once dreamed of making pancakes for small, laughing children. Now, it was just a gleaming, sterile expanse of marble and steel, as unused and untouched as I felt. I looked at the calendar on my phone. Another cycle, another month of my body's quiet, pointless preparation for a child that would never be conceived. The quiet was broken by the smooth snick of the elevator door opening directly into our foyer. Christian was home. Summer? In the living room. His voice was smooth, confident, the voice he used with clients and investors. "Here," I called out, forcing my lips into a smile just as he rounded the corner. He looked perfect, of course. His $1,000 suit was unrumpled, his blue eyes bright with the thrill of whatever victory he'd secured that day. He was a man lit from within, but none of that light ever seemed to reach me. "Sorry I'm late, darling." The final call with the Singapore partners went on forever. He loosened his tie, the only sign of fatigue, and placed a perfunctory kiss on my cheek. It felt like a stamp of ownership, cold and dry. He glanced at the table, the untouched wine. "Good. You waited." "I was just thinking," I began, my voice softer than I'd intended. "I had to try. I had to know. Christian, we've been married 3 years. The company is thriving. You're thriving. Don't you think it's finally time?" He paused, halfway through pouring himself a scotch. That familiar, practiced mask of mild confusion settled over his features. "Time for what?" "A baby, Christian. A family. You know it's what I want. What I thought we wanted." He sighed, a sound of polite exasperation. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching it instead of me. "Summer, we've been over this. The timing is just not right. We have the gala next month and then the trip to Zurich. Starting a family is a huge commitment. It requires focus. My focus is elsewhere right now. My focus isn't, I said, a dangerous edge creeping into my voice. My focus is right here in this empty apartment. I'm 32, Christian. I don't want to wait until the timing is right. I want to build a life with you, not just be an accessory to yours. He finally looked at me and his eyes were not warm. They were cold, appraising, like a jeweler spotting a flaw in a stone. An accessory? Is that what you think? The penthouse, the clothes, the life I've given you, you call that being an accessory? I call it a consolation prize, I whispered, the truth of it stinging my own throat. His face hardened. You're being emotional. We can't have a rational discussion when you're like this. He picked up his glass and his briefcase. I have some briefs to review before morning. Let's talk about this when you're feeling less overwhelmed. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned and walked down the long, echoing hallway toward his home office, the sound of his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. The door closed with a quiet, definitive thud, leaving me alone once more in the vast, silent room, with only my own cold reflection for company. The gilded cage was locked for the night, and I was trapped inside, with a sudden, chilling certainty that my husband's excuses weren't just deflections. They were a wall, and I had no idea what he was hiding behind it. Marcus Delcroix was the ghost at our wedding feast. He'd been Christian's business partner since college, his best friend, and, as I was quickly learning, the third, unspoken member of our marriage. He was as dark as Christian was fair, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a quiet intensity that made me uneasy. He was at our penthouse so often for strategy sessions that I'd half-joked we should set a permanent place for him at the table. Christian hadn't laughed. Marcus's family summer, Christian had said, his tone leaving no room for argument. This company, Morrison Investment Group, we built it from nothing. He's my brother. But I had never seen brothers interact the way they did. It was in the small things, the gestures I was trained to notice from my years coordinating high-stakes events. It was the way Christian's entire posture relaxed when Marcus entered a room, a genuine, unguarded smile breaking across his face, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. It was the way they could communicate across a crowded dinner party with a single, shared glance. It was an intimacy so complete, so effortless, that it made me feel like an intruder in my own home. I was the third wheel, polished and presentable, but fundamentally outside the orbit of their shared world. They had a universe of inside jokes, a history that predated me, and a professional symbiosis that left no room for a mere wife. When I tried to join their conversations about market projections or acquisition targets, Christian would pat my hand condescendingly. "Don't worry your pretty head about this, darling. It's dreadfully boring." But I could see Marcus watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't hostility. It was something closer to pity. The breaking point came on our third anniversary. I was determined to break through the ice that had formed around our marriage. I planned an evening designed to remind him of the man he'd been when he'd courted me, the man who'd sent flowers, who'd quoted poetry, who'd kissed me on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. I'd booked a table at the impossibly exclusive restaurant where he'd first told me he loved me. I spent the afternoon preparing, not as a corporate wife but as his wife. I wore a silk dress the color of the midnight sky, the one he used to say made my eyes look electric. He was supposed to be home at 7. At 7:30 I was pacing the penthouse. At 8 I was sipping a glass of wine, the knot in my stomach tightening. At 8:15 my phone buzzed. It was a text from Christian. "Finishing up at the office. Marcus is here. We're deep in the quarterly reports. Don't wait up. Happy anniversary, by the way." By the way. The casual, callous afterthought was like a slap. Rage, cold and sharp, cut through the fog of my disappointment. I stared at the message, at the two names, Christian and Marcus, together again. He wasn't just late. He was with him. On our anniversary. I typed a reply, my fingers shaking. "I'm at per se. Our reservation was for 8. I'm coming to the office." I didn't wait for his response. I grabbed my clutch, stormed out of the apartment, and took the elevator straight down to the garage. The drive to his downtown office was a blur of rain-slicked streets and angry tears. This wasn't just neglect, this was a choice. He was actively choosing his partner over his wife, on the one night that was supposed to be ours. The security guard in the lobby, a man who had seen me countless times on Christian's arm at galas, nodded me through. "Working late, Mrs. Morrison?" "You could say that," I said, my voice tight. The elevator opened onto the 40th floor. The main office was dark, but a sliver of light escaped from under the door of Christian's corner office at the end of the hall. The building was tomb silent except for the click of my heels on the granite floor. As I got closer, I heard voices. Laughter. Not the strained, polite laughter of a business meeting, but a low, genuine, comfortable sound. I didn't knock. I pushed the heavy glass door open. They didn't hear me at first. They were standing by the window, not at the desk. The quarterly reports were nowhere to be seen. Instead, an open bottle of Macallan 25, Christian's private stash, sat on the credenza. They were looking out at the city lights, standing closer than business partners should. Marcus was adjusting Christian's tie, his fingers lingering on the silk. It was a gesture so casual, so proprietary, so arrestingly intimate that the air left my lungs. And then he actually tried to cite the 2008 figures as a comparable, Christian was saying, his voice rich with amusement. "He's an idiot," Marcus replied, his voice a low murmur. His hand was still on Christian's chest. "You should have let me handle him." "I always let you handle me," Christian said with a soft chuckle. Then they turned, sensing the change in the room. Christian's smile evaporated, replaced by that cold, calculating mask. Marcus, to his credit, just looked weary. He dropped his hand from Christian's tie. "Summer," Christian said, his voice instantly sharp with annoyance. "What are you doing here? I told you not to wait up." "It's our anniversary," I said, my voice trembling despite my anger. "I was waiting for you at the restaurant. The one where you told me you loved me. Or was that part of a quarterly projection too?" Christian sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. "Summer, you're being hysterical. Marcus and I were closing a massive deal. This is important." "More important than your marriage?" "Frankly," Christian said, his voice dropping to an icy calm, "this deal will fund our lives for the next decade. Your dinner reservation won't. This is the adult world, Summer. These are the priorities. Marcus understands that. Why can't you?" He looked at Marcus as he said it, a look of shared exasperation, as if I were a petulant child who had interrupted a vital conversation. In that moment, standing in my midnight blue dress that he hadn't even noticed, I saw the truth. I was the interruption. I was the inconvenient, emotional, demanding outsider. They were the unit. They were the we. "You're right," I said, my voice suddenly dangerously calm. The tears had vanished, replaced by something hard and cold. "You've made your priorities perfectly clear." I turned and walked out. I didn't look back to see Christian's annoyance or Marcus's pity. I just walked, the sound of my heels echoing in the vast, empty office. I was done waiting. I was done trying to break into a marriage that had never had room for me in the first place. I was just done. The trip to Tuscany was, as always, aggressively perfect. After the disastrous anniversary, Christian had gone into damage control mode. He'd apologized, not for the substance of his actions but for the misunderstanding. He claimed the pressure was getting to him and that a change of scenery would do them good. And so, 2 weeks later, we were in a sun-drenched villa overlooking rolling vineyards, a place so beautiful it felt like a painted backdrop. Christian was playing Prince Charming again, the role he slipped into whenever we traveled. He held my hand as we walked through ancient villages, bought me jewelry I didn't want, and posted photos of us on social media, captioned, "My beautiful wife. My perfect life." His followers, our friends, left comments about what #relationship goals we were. I smiled for the pictures, the lie feeling heavy and sour in my mouth. The man holding me was a stranger, and this perfection was a lie. The intimacy was gone, replaced by a hollow performance that only seemed to highlight the vast, freezing chasm between us. The more he tried to charm me, the more I saw the calculating man from the office, the one whose real partnership was with Marcus. When we returned to Manhattan, the performance ended the moment the elevator doors opened. Christian's warmth vanished, replaced by the familiar, distracted coolness of the CEO. "I've got to get to the office," he'd said, dropping his bags in the foyer. "We're in the middle of that Singapore acquisition. Marcus has been holding down the fort. And just like that, he was gone. He left me in the silent penthouse, surrounded by luggage and the scent of Italian leather and cypress, feeling more alone than I had in the Tuscan villa. I wandered through the rooms, the silence amplifying my despair. The confrontation, the empty trip, it had all led back to this. Nothing had changed. I passed his home office. The door, usually closed and locked, was slightly ajar. I stopped. He must have come back at some point, grabbed some files, and left in a hurry. I pushed the door open, propelled by an impulse I didn't bother to question. The room was dark, the blinds drawn against the afternoon sun. His desk was immaculate, as always. But something was wrong. Behind the abstract painting on the far wall was his personal safe. I knew it was there. I'd watched him use it countless times, his fingers flying over the digital keypad with practiced ease. He kept his passport in there, important deeds, bearer bonds, things he didn't even trust to a bank. Christian was meticulous, obsessive about security. He checked the locks on the penthouse door 3 times every night. The painting was crooked. And the safe door behind it was open. My heart slammed against my ribs. He never made mistakes. He never left things unsecured. This was an oversight so profound, so out of character, it felt like a glitch in the matrix. I stood frozen for a full minute, my conscience warring with the desperate, clawing need to know. The scene from his office, Marcus's hand on his tie, Christian's look of shared exasperation, flashed in my mind. My marriage was already a fraud. What was one more violation? My hands were trembling as I pushed the heavy steel door open. It swung smoothly, silently. Inside, the small carpeted space was lined with files. Property deeds for the penthouse, the house in the Hamptons. Investment portfolios. His will. I touched nothing, my eyes scanning, though I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Then I saw it. At the very bottom, beneath a stack of stock certificates, lay a single, unremarkable manila envelope. It had no corporate logo, no label. It was just plain, slightly worn, and looked profoundly out of place among the official embossed documents. I hesitated, my breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was the boundary. Don't, a small, terrified voice whispered. Whatever is in there, you can't unsee it. I pulled it out. The envelope was light. My fingers fumbled with the metal clasp, my nails scraping against the paper. I slid out a single folded sheet of paper. It was thick, creamy white, and bore the letterhead of an institution I'd never heard of, Metropolitan Men's Health Center. I unfolded it. It was a medical report. My eyes immediately snagged on the date, printed in the upper right-hand corner. It was from 3.5 years ago. 3 months before he had walked into my hotel. 3 months before he had dazzled me with his smile. 3 months before our fairy tale had ever begun. I scanned the page, my brain struggling to process the clinical language. Patient, Christian Morrison. Consultation regarding. And then I saw the procedure. My vision tunneled. The sounds of the city outside, the hum of the apartment, everything faded to a dull, distant roar. Procedure, vasectomy. Status, completed. Follow-up, confirmed. Patient counseled on permanence of voluntary sterilization. The document slipped from my numb fingers and drifted to the carpet. I gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling. I read the words again, lying on the floor. Voluntary sterilization. Permanence. Completed. Every conversation we'd ever had about children flashed through my mind, now cast in a sickening, grotesque light. His polite deflections. Let's wait, darling. The timing isn't right. The market is volatile. It was all a lie. A breathtakingly cruel, calculated, and intricate lie. He hadn't been waiting for the right time. He had been acting. He had sat across from me at dinner, listening to me talk about baby names and nursery colors, all while knowing it was impossible. He had let me wonder, let me worry, let me subtly, privately, begin to fear that I was the problem. That my body was failing. He hadn't just deceived me. He had authored my private, silent anguish. He hadn't just hidden the truth, he had built our entire life on its grave. The cold from the marble floor seeped into my knees as I knelt there, the room tilting. The cage I was in wasn't just gilded. It was a trap. And I finally, horribly, understood how it worked. I stayed on the floor of his office for a long time, the silence of the room pressing in, amplifying the sound of my own fractured breathing. The cream-colored paper on the carpet seemed to glow in the dim light. Voluntary sterilization. The words echoed, rewriting every memory, every smile, every shared future he had ever painted for me. It was a poison that worked its way backward, turning 3 years of my life into a sick, elaborate joke. I was the punchline. My shock began to recede, replaced by a terrifying, arctic clarity. It was as if I had been looking at a painting, focusing on a single, confusing brushstroke, and had suddenly been thrown backward to see the entire, horrifying masterpiece. The vasectomy. Dated before he met me. The prenup. I winced, remembering how my lawyer had tried to warn me. This clause is unusual, Summer. Annulment in the event of undisclosed infertility or unwillingness to produce an heir. It's archaic and aggressive. I'd waved her off, blinded by love, by Christian's reassurances. It's just boilerplate, darling. A formality. The avoidance. His constant travel. His work dinners. His polite, clinical rejection of any intimacy, which I had internalized as my own failure to be desirable. And then, Marcus. The scene in the office replayed in my mind, Marcus's hand on Christian's tie. The easy intimacy. The shared laugh. I always let you handle me. It wasn't a brotherhood. It was the relationship. The real one. I was the cover. I was the beautiful, socially acceptable, soon-to-be defective wife. I was the beard. The public-facing half of his perfect life, designed to produce the one thing his relationship with Marcus couldn't, a legitimate, old-money heir. No, wait. That wasn't right. The vasectomy proved he never wanted an heir at all. So what was the plan? The cold clarity sharpened into a razor's edge. He marries me, a woman who vocally wants a family. He has a prenup that voids our marriage if we don't have one. He has a medical document proving he can't. No, he has a secret medical document. He would never use it. He would wait. Wait 1 year, 2, 3, until the problem became undeniable. Until I became the problem. He would let me go to doctors. He would let them test me, probe me, and find nothing wrong, which would only make me seem hysterical, desperate. And then, when the time was right, he would stand in a courtroom, the picture of a devastated husband, and claim I was the one who was barren. I was the one who had defrauded him by concealing my inability to give him a child. He would have the prenup. He would have his millions. He would have his brother, Marcus. And I would be left with nothing but public humiliation and a reputation as a defective, lying woman. It was not just a lie, it was a script, a meticulously crafted, sociopathic play, and I had been performing my role perfectly for 3 years without ever seeing the pages. I picked up the document. My hands were perfectly steady. The trembling was gone, replaced by a charge of pure, undiluted adrenaline. I had to be sure. I had to see it with my own eyes outside the context of his office or our home. I needed the final piece. I looked at my watch. 6:30 p.m. Christian had told me he had a board dinner tonight. A lie I now knew. He was with Marcus. I stood up, my knees aching. I walked back to the safe, placed the envelope exactly as I had found it, underneath the stock certificates. I swung the heavy door shut, spun the lock, and nudged the painting back into its perfectly level position. I erased myself. I left the penthouse, but not as a grieving wife. I left as a predator. I took a cab to Marcus's apartment in Tribeca, a sleek, discreet building known for its privacy. I didn't go to the door. I positioned myself across the street, in the deep shadow of a closed bakery's awning. The street was quiet. I waited. An hour passed. The night air was cool, but I felt nothing. I was utterly focused, a statue of pure intention. At 8:42 p.m., a black Uber pulled up to the curb. Not Christian's town car, too traceable. The back door opened. Christian got out first, laughing at something said inside the car. Then Marcus emerged, smiling. They stood on the sidewalk for a moment, bathed in the glow of the lobby's entrance lights. Christian, my husband, the man who hadn't touched me with genuine affection in months, reached out. He cupped Marcus's face in his hands. He leaned in and he kissed him. It was not a friendly kiss. It was not a brotherly kiss. It was a deep, possessive, romantic kiss, the kiss of a man coming home. It was the kiss he used to give me, back when he was still playing the part. After a long moment, Christian rested his forehead against Marcus's, his eyes closed. They murmured something to each other, and then Christian, with one last, lingering touch to Marcus's arm, turned and walked away, hailing another cab. Marcus watched him go, then turned and disappeared into his building. I stayed in the shadows until Christian's cab was long gone. I felt no tears. The pain of the betrayal had been cauterized, burned away by the white-hot fury of the truth. He had built a cage for me, and he was already forging the key to lock me out and blame me for it. He'd underestimated me. He saw me as a soft, emotional, naive events coordinator he'd picked up. He thought he was the architect, the master planner. He had no idea that an events coordinator's entire job is to see every detail, manage every moving part, and anticipate every possible disaster. And he had just become the disaster I was going to manage. I returned to the penthouse. When Christian came home 2 hours later, humming, reeking faintly of Marcus's expensive cologne, I was in our bed. I kept my breathing even, my eyes closed, simulating sleep. He undressed in the dark, slid into the bed, and turned his back to me, as he always did. I lay awake, staring into the blackness, my eyes wide open. The game was on. Grief is a luxury I could not afford. The woman who had cried over a missed anniversary dinner was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, a person of chilling calm and singular focus. When I woke up the next morning, Christian was already gone, a note on the kitchen counter about an early breakfast meeting. With Marcus, no doubt. The lie was so casual, so effortless, it no longer sparked anger. It was simply data. I was an operative in my own home, a spy in my own marriage. My first move was to secure my resources. Years ago my grandmother had passed away, leaving me a modest inheritance. It was enough to buy a small apartment in my pre-Christian life. I had never touched it, never even mentioned it to Christian. He managed all our finances, sweeping my old accounts into his vast, labyrinthine financial empire. But he had missed this one, an account at a small credit union in my hometown. It was my what-if fund, and the what-if had finally arrived. I spent the day researching. I wasn't looking for a divorce lawyer, I was looking for a shark. I needed someone who specialized in matrimonial cases where the husband was a high-net-worth, high-profile liar. But before a lawyer, I needed something else. I needed proof. My word against his would be a joke. He was Christian Morrison, the charismatic titan. I was his emotional wife. What I saw on that Tribeca Street was a truth for me, but it was not evidence for a court. My search led me to a name, Sarah Chen. She wasn't with a flashy firm. Her office was a small, unassuming suite in Queens, and her online presence was minimal. But the testimonials were lethal. She found things people thought were buried in concrete. She specialized in complex asset concealment and matrimonial counter-surveillance. She was, by all accounts, a ghost. She was perfect. I paid for the consultation in cash, at a coffee shop in Astoria where I was certain I wouldn't be recognized. Sarah Chen was in her 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple blazer and had a no-nonsense demeanor that I found instantly reassuring. She didn't offer condolences. She just listened. "My husband is Christian Morrison," I began. Her eyebrow ticked up, the only sign of surprise. "Morrison Investment Group. I know the name. You're alleging infidelity." "I am," I said, my voice as level as hers. "With his business partner, Marcus Delcroix." Sarah's expression didn't flicker. "A same-sex affair with a business partner. That's complex. It's not just adultery. It's a breach of fiduciary duty if they've been commingling company funds for personal use. What makes you sure?" "I saw them," I said. "But I need proof. I need photographs. I need hotel registrations, dinner receipts, travel manifests. I need anything that builds a timeline and proves this isn't a new development." I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I also believe he is building a fraudulent case to annul our marriage and activate a specific clause in our prenup. I need you to find everything. His world, his real world, not the one he shows me." I did not mention the vasectomy. That document was my ace, my silver bullet, and I would not fire it until the moment it could do the most damage. For now I would let the affair be the tip of the spear. Sarah studied me for a long moment, a flicker of professional respect in her eyes. Most wives in your position are crying. You're not. My husband is trying to systematically destroy my life, I replied, my voice flat. I don't have time to cry. Can you get it or not? A small, thin smile touched her lips. He's a high-profile target. He'll be careful. Discreet. It will be expensive. I have my own funds, I said, sliding a cash retainer across the table. He won't see the expense. Just find it. Give me 3 weeks, she said, sweeping the cash into her bag. And Mrs. Morrison? Go home and play the part. Be the wife he expects you to be. Don't get emotional. Don't ask questions. Be forgettable. The more comfortable he is, the sloppier he'll get. It was the best advice I'd ever received. For the next 3 weeks, I performed the role of my life. I was the perfect, dutiful, slightly melancholy wife. I attended his galas, smiling on his arm. I hosted his vapid dinner parties, laughing at his partner's bad jokes. I even made a half-hearted attempt to bring up the starting a family conversation, allowing him to deflect it as he always did. I played the part of the defeated, naive woman so convincingly I think he almost felt sorry for me. He became more brazen. The late nights with Marcus grew more frequent. The scent of Marcus's cologne on his suit jackets became a regular occurrence. He was getting sloppy. He was getting arrogant. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was at the Met, my usual cover for my off days. I have it, Sarah's voice said in my ear. All of it. Meet me. We met at the same coffee shop. This time she didn't waste time on pleasantries. She slid a thick 9x12 envelope across the table. My name wasn't even on it. I opened it. The photographs were on top, printed in stark, damning color. Christian and Marcus holding hands across a small, candlelit table at a restaurant in the village I'd never heard of. Christian and Marcus checking into a midtown hotel, not for a meeting but in the middle of a Saturday afternoon. And the centerpiece, the one that made my stomach clench, a crystal-clear shot taken through the window of Marcus's apartment. Christian was in a state of undress, kissing Marcus with a desperate, passionate hunger that I had not seen since the first days of our courtship. Beneath the photos were the documents. Hotel folios paid for by a corporate card under Marcus's name but with room service charges for 2. Credit card statements detailing gifts, dinners, and trips that I was never a part of. Phone records showing hundreds of calls between them, many lasting for hours, often placed after 1 a.m., when Christian was supposedly asleep next to me. Sarah had built a timeline. It wasn't just an affair. It was a life. A long-term, committed, primary relationship that predated me by years. I stared at the evidence, the physical proof of my husband's complete and total betrayal. The cold, hard fury was still there, but it was now joined by something else, the sharp, satisfying click of a trap being set. Christian thought he was the architect of my destruction. He had no idea I was holding the blueprints to his. This is, I said, my voice thick. Irrefutable, Sarah finished. This will void any fidelity clause in your prenup. This is adultery, plain and simple. It's leverage. It's more than that, I said, sliding the photos back into the envelope. It's the beginning. I looked up at her, my mind already calculating the next 10 moves. I have one more job for you. The one more job I had for Sarah Chen was to find me a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I didn't want the standard Park Avenue divorce attorney who would negotiate a quiet, tidy settlement. I wanted a litigator. I wanted a warrior. Sarah recommended a woman named Jennifer Walsh. Her office was not a sleek, high-rise temple of corporate law. It was a cluttered, book-filled suite of rooms in a pre-war building, and she had a reputation for taking on Goliaths and breaking their knees. She specialized in fraudulent inducement and spousal contract violations. When I sat down in her office, she looked at me over the top of her reading glasses and said, "I've read about your husband. He's a predator. Tell me why I'm wrong." I didn't try. I simply laid out the evidence. I placed the envelope of photographs, Christian and Marcus kissing, holding hands, checking into hotels, on her desk. Jennifer looked through them, her expression clinical. This is classic high-stakes adultery. It's solid. It's leverage to break the fidelity provisions of your prenup. We can get you a very, very generous settlement. I don't want a settlement, Ms. Walsh, I said, my voice quiet. I want a public execution. He has a plan. I want to know mine is better. Jennifer leaned back, her eyes sharpening. What plan? Our prenup, I said. It has a clause. Clause 7, Section 4. Failure to produce an heir. He's going to claim I was infertile and that I concealed it from him. He's going to use it to have the marriage annulled and leave me with nothing. Jennifer was silent for a moment. That's not just a divorce. That's a character assassination. It's barbaric. And it's going to be his word against yours, she said about your fertility. He'll drag you through a medical circus. Yes, he will, I said. He's counting on me to be humiliated. He's counting on me to be broken. He's counting on me to take a small, quiet settlement to make it go away. And you're not. No, I said. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on her desk. You file the papers. Cite irreconcilable differences. Don't mention the adultery. Don't mention Marcus. Don't show him our hand. Let him make the first move. Let him be the one to bring up my infertility. Let him build his entire case on it, publicly and loudly. Let him walk into the trap. Then we spring it. A slow, appreciative smile spread across Jennifer's face. You're a cold-blooded woman, Mrs. Morrison. I'm a fast learner, Ms. Walsh. Jennifer filed the divorce petition the next day. It was a simple 2-page document. As expected, Christian was served at his office. In front of his partners. In front of Marcus. He didn't come home until well after 10. I was in the living room, not waiting but reading a book under the cold light of a single lamp. I heard the elevator ding, the sound of his key in the lock, a redundant, angry gesture. He strode into the room, his face a mask of controlled fury, but his eyes were amused. He saw this as a child's tantrum. He tossed the folded legal documents onto the marble coffee table. They skidded and came to a stop next to my book. A petition, he said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. Really, Summer? A petition? After everything I've given you? This is a remarkably childish and expensive way to get my attention. I marked my page with a bookmark and closed the book, placing it calmly on my lap. It's not a tantrum, Christian. It's a legal proceeding. I want a divorce. He actually laughed. A short, sharp, humorless sound. A divorce. You want a divorce. You have no idea what you're doing. You're emotional. You're still upset about the anniversary, I suppose. It's pathetic. He loosened his tie, the picture of a man burdened by an unstable woman. Fine. You've made your point. I'll buy you that diamond bracelet you were eyeing in Tuscany. Now you will call this Jennifer Walsh in the morning and you will tell her you've made a terrible mistake. I won't be doing that, I said simply, my voice even. The amusement in his eyes vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating expression I'd seen in his office. The negotiator. The predator. I see, he said slowly. You think you're going to take me to court. You think you're going to get a piece of my company. You think you're going to walk away with half. He stepped closer, leaning down, his hands on the coffee table. You might want to go back and read the document you signed so eagerly 3 years ago, darling. You might want to refresh your memory. I just looked at him. I remember it. Oh, good, he whispered, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Then you remember Clause 7, Section 4. The heir clause. The one about our shared desire to build a family. The one you, unfortunately, have been unable to fulfill. He said it. He laid his entire disgusting card on the table. He was going to do it. He was really going to stand up in a court and call me barren. And you're going to claim that? I asked, my voice a perfect imitation of dawning, horrified realization. Claim it, he said, his confidence surging as he mistook my calm for terror. I'm going to prove it. I am going to annul this marriage, Summer. It will be as if it never happened. You will walk away with exactly what you came in with, nothing. In fact, I'll be countersuing you for fraud. For trapping me in a childless marriage by concealing your condition. He stood up, straightening his suit jacket, his arrogance radiating like a cold sun. He believed he had won. He believed his plan was flawless, his secret buried, and his wife terrified. "You're defective, Summer," he said, the words sharp and precise, "and you will be left with nothing but that label. I built you. I gave you this life. And I will take it all back." He checked his watch. "I have work to do. Marcus is waiting. I suggest you go to a hotel. Think very, very hard about the war you're about to start with a man who has never, ever lost." He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing on the marble. I sat in the silent room, the legal papers on the table. I didn't feel fear. I felt relief. He'd done it. He'd taken the bait. He'd just publicly confirmed his entire sociopathic strategy to his only victim. And I had him. The day of the preliminary hearing, I dressed for war. I chose a navy suit, severe and sharp, a white silk shell, and heels high enough to be heard but low enough to be stable. My hair was pulled back into a tight, severe bun. There would be no hint of the emotional, delicate woman Christian had described. I was, I hoped, a portrait of cold, competent ice. Jennifer Walsh met me at the courthouse steps. She had warned me, "He's going to make a circus of this. His only play is to humiliate you into submission. Don't react. No matter what he says, no matter what his lawyer implies, you are a statue. You are marble. You feel nothing. We let them build their entire case and then we knock it over. Understand?" I nodded, my stomach a cold knot of dread and adrenaline. "I understand." As we walked through the metal detectors, I saw that Christian's request for a closed hearing had been a sham. The gallery was packed. Reporters from the Post and the Times business section were crammed into the front benches, pens poised. Christian hadn't wanted privacy, he'd wanted an audience for my execution. We took our table. I sat, placed my hands on my lap, and stared at the state seal carved into the heavy oak of the judge's bench. I did not scan the crowd. I did not look for him. He made his entrance 2 minutes before the judge, a piece of calculated theater. He walked in flanked by his legal team, 3 men in identical $1,000 suits. His lawyer, a silver-haired man named Sloan, had a predatory reptilian smile. Christian himself looked magnificent in his victimhood. He wore a somber charcoal suit, his expression a perfect mask of tragic, burdened nobility. He was here to perform the role of the devoted husband, heartbroken by his wife's betrayal. And then I saw Marcus. He wasn't at the table, but he was in the front row, directly behind Christian, his face set in a look of grave, supportive concern. The business partner, the brother, there to support his best friend through this terrible ordeal. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Harrison entered, a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, and the room fell silent. She ran through the initial motions, her voice sharp. Then she looked to Christian's table. "Mr. Sloan, I've read the initial petition for divorce and your counterpetition for annulment. The claims in your counterpetition are stark. The floor is yours." Sloan rose, buttoning his jacket. He clasped his hands behind his back and paced for a moment, the very picture of a man reluctant to perform a necessary but painful duty. "Thank you, Your Honor," he began, his voice resonant and smooth. "We are here today because of a fraud. A fraud so profound, so personal, it strikes at the very heart of the sacred contract of marriage." He gestured to Christian, who obediently lowered his head, pinching the bridge of his nose as if overcome with pain. "My client, Mr. Christian Morrison," Sloan continued, his voice ringing with manufactured sympathy, "is a man who has built an empire from the ground up. But his deepest desire, the desire that has animated his entire life, was to build a family. To have an heir. To share that life with a partner who wanted the same." He paused, letting the reporters' pens scratch across their notepads. "He met Mrs. Morrison. He fell in love. They discussed their future, a future filled with children. They signed a prenuptial agreement that made this shared dream its cornerstone. It was, Your Honor, the entire basis of the contract. And it was a lie." He stopped pacing and turned, pointing a dramatic finger directly at me. "This marriage failed, Your Honor, for one devastating reason. Mrs. Morrison, the woman my client trusted, was and is sterile." A collective, sharp inhale sucked the air from the room. The whispers started instantly, a sibilant, ugly sound. I did not move. I kept my eyes on the state seal. Marble. I am marble. She knew. Sloane's voice boomed, righteous and angry. She knew she was unable to conceive. She knew my client's deepest, most fundamental requirement for this marriage. And she fraudulently concealed her condition. She trapped him. She lied to him every single day of their 3-year marriage, letting him believe they were trying for a family, while knowing it was a biological impossibility. He walked back to his table, picked up a document. The prenuptial agreement is clear. In the event of such a fraud, the marriage is null and void. We are not here to discuss the division of assets because there are no marital assets to divide. We are here to dissolve a fraudulent contract, initiated by a woman who is not just a liar but defective. Defective. He used the word. The word Christian had used in our living room. It was designed to shatter me, to brand me. Sloane sat down. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket. Every eye in the room was on me. I could feel their stares, a mixture of pity, disgust, and morbid curiosity. I saw the reporters, heads down, writing furiously. The headline was already written: Barren wife defrauds millionaire husband. Christian's performance was flawless. He had done it. He had publicly humiliated me, defined me as a broken, deceitful woman, and set the stage to leave me with absolutely nothing. Judge Harrison looked down at the counterpetition, her brow furrowed. Then she lifted her gaze and looked at me, her expression unreadable, but tinged with what looked like pity. "Ms. Walsh," the judge said, her voice heavy. "These are some of the most serious allegations I have ever read in a preliminary hearing. How does your client respond?" All eyes in the courtroom swiveled to our table. Jennifer Walsh rose, taking a deliberate moment to straighten her files. She exuded a calm that was almost insulting. She strode to the podium, unintimidated by Sloane's outburst. "Your Honor," Jennifer's voice was calm and clear, cutting through the tense silence, "we do not dispute Mr. Sloane's claim that this marriage was built on a lie. Nor do we dispute that conception, as he so eloquently put it, was a biological impossibility." A fresh wave of murmurs swept the room. I could feel Christian's eyes on my back, confused and wary. He hadn't expected us to concede. Sloane's thin smile widened, anticipating a plea. "However," Jennifer continued, "we vehemently dispute who the deceiver was in this marriage, and who was responsible for said impossibility." Judge Harrison narrowed her eyes. "Elaborate, Ms. Walsh. You concede pregnancy was impossible?" "Absolutely impossible, Your Honor. But not due to my client," Jennifer stated. She turned towards me and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a cue we had rehearsed. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Morrison, wishes to present the court with evidence pertaining to this matter herself." Again, a ripple of whispers went through the courtroom. A client speaking directly at this stage was highly unusual. Judge Harrison looked at me, her look of pity now replaced with sharp curiosity. "Proceed, Mrs. Morrison." I stood. The click of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. It felt like a ticking clock. From my purse I withdrew a single plain manila envelope. The same envelope I had found in his safe. I did not look at Christian. I did not look at Marcus. I did not look at the reporters who were now leaning forward, their eyes wide. I simply looked at Judge Harrison. Christian and Sloane exchanged a glance, a condescending smirk playing on Sloane's lips. What did they think I was bringing? A diary? Love letters? They thought this was the desperate, emotional woman's last-ditch plea. They thought they knew exactly how this would play out. I reached the judge's bench and placed the envelope before her. "Your Honor," I said, my voice strong and steady, surprising even myself, "Mr. Sloane is correct. There was a medical fraud committed in this marriage. But the medical records you require are not mine. They belong to my husband, Christian Morrison." Judge Harrison's face hardened. She picked up the envelope. The silence in the courtroom was so profound it was deafening. Her manicured fingers unfastened the metal clasp and slid out a single cream-colored sheet of paper. The reporters held their breath. Christian stopped smiling. Judge Harrison read the document. I watched her as her eyes scanned quickly across the page. I saw the moment she understood. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then narrowed into a look of pure, cold fury. She raised her head, not looking at me, but staring straight across the room, directly at Christian. Her face was a mask of judicial wrath. She held up the paper. "Mr. Sloane," she said, her voice low and dangerous, every word sharply enunciated, "your client's petition for annulment is based on the claim that his wife is infertile and defrauded him." "That is correct, Your Honor," Sloane said, still arrogant. "Then," the judge said, her voice now lethal, "can you explain to this court why I am holding a certified medical record stating that your client, Mr. Christian Morrison, underwent a voluntary vasectomy 3 months before he ever met his wife?" Time stopped. Then chaos erupted. The courtroom exploded in a collective gasp. Reporters shrieked, then began scribbling furiously, some even laughing in disbelief. I turned from the judge's bench and looked at my husband. Christian's face had gone from noble arrogance to a ghastly, deathly white. All the blood drained from his features. His eyes were wide with horror, locked on me, then darting to Sloane, then back to me. He understood. He finally understood. Sloane, the predatory lawyer, his mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a beached fish. He was utterly stunned. And Marcus. I allowed myself to glance at him. He looked like he was about to vomit. He stared at Christian with an expression of horror and betrayal, as if he, too, had not known the depth of this lie. "Your Honor," Sloane finally stammered, leaping to his feet. This is preposterous. This is an unverified, fabricated document." "It is a notarized medical record, Mr. Sloane," Judge Harrison snapped, her voice cutting through the din, "and I assure you we will be verifying it. Your client appears to have committed perjury in his written filings." "And Your Honor," Jennifer Walsh rose, her voice cutting in like a scalpel, "since Mr. Sloane has raised the matter of fraud and breach of contract." She stepped forward and placed a second envelope on the judge's bench. A thicker one. The one from Sarah Chen. "We have evidence as to the real reason for Mr. Morrison's elaborate sociopathic fraud. This is evidence of a long-term, undisclosed affair Mr. Morrison has conducted throughout the entirety of his marriage." Judge Harrison, her face already flushed with anger, tore open the second envelope. She pulled out the first photograph. The one of Christian at Marcus's apartment door, kissing him with unmistakable passion. Christian Morrison crumpled in his seat, as if his spine had been removed. The trap had been set. And just now in public it had snapped shut. The courtroom was a feeding frenzy. The judge's pronouncement of the vasectomy had been a grenade. The photographs of Christian and Marcus were the secondary explosion, far more devastating. Reporters were no longer just scribbling. They were running, bolting from their benches and shoving their way through the heavy doors to be the first to break the news. Millionaire mogul's marriage a fraud. Morrison exposed in secret love affair with male partner. I could already see the headlines. Christian sat frozen, a man hollowed out. His mask of tragic nobility was gone, shattered on the marble floor. What remained was a pale, slack-jawed stranger, his eyes darting between the judge, the photos in her hand, and me. He looked, for the first time since I'd met him, small. Sloane, his high-priced lawyer, was sputtering, objecting to everything and nothing, a flurry of, "Your Honor, this is prejudicial," and "We were not given time to review." Judge Harrison slammed her gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "Silence, Mr. Sloane," she commanded, her voice vibrating with a rage that was no longer just judicial. It was personal. She was a woman who had just seen another woman systematically dissected by a sociopath, and she was having none of it. "I have seen enough," the judge declared, her eyes burning holes into Christian. "Mr. Sloane, your counterpetition for annulment is not only denied, it is stricken from the record as a malicious, perjurious, and fraudulent filing. Mr. Morrison, you will be lucky if my office does not recommend the district attorney review your testimony for criminal charges." Sloane turned white. Christian seemed to shrink further into his suit. "Furthermore," the judge continued, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on me, "this court finds that the prenuptial agreement, the entire basis of this marriage, was predicated on a material and sociopathic fraud. Mrs. Morrison was induced to sign this contract under the false pretense that she was entering a good-faith marriage with a man who shared her desire for a family. In reality, she was being used. She was being set up as a scapegoat in an elaborate, cruel scheme." She looked back down at the papers. Therefore, this court finds the prenuptial agreement dated August 14, 3 years ago, to be null, void, and entirely unenforceable. It is as if it never existed. Christian made a sound, a strangled, choking noise. He had lost his shield. He was exposed. Which means, gentlemen, Jennifer Walsh said, standing up, her voice slicing through the silence like a razor, we revert to the standard community property laws of the state of New York. My client is entitled to 50%. 50% of everything, Judge Harrison affirmed, her voice a final, iron gavel strike. 50% of all assets acquired during this 3-year marriage. This includes the primary residence. This includes all properties, all liquid assets, all stock portfolios, and 50% of the marital stake in Morrison Investment Group. That was the kill shot. Christian's head snapped up, a look of pure, unadulterated horror on his face. No, he whispered. No. The company, that's mine. We built that. You built it during your marriage, the judge snapped. You built it while your wife, the woman you were actively defrauding, was managing your home, hosting your clients, and acting as your unpaid social partner. She is entitled to her share. This court hereby freezes all assets of Morrison Investment Group pending a full and complete forensic audit. You, Mr. Morrison, will not move $1 without this court's approval. It was over. It was a total, catastrophic annihilation. In the front row, Marcus Delqua stood up, his face ashen, and stumbled out of the courtroom, pushing past the throng of reporters still trying to get in. He didn't look at Christian. He just fled. I stood up. Jennifer packed her briefcase, a small, satisfied smile on her lips. I smoothed the front of my suit. I felt light. The weight of 3 years of lies, of self-doubt, of manufactured inadequacy had evaporated. I turned to walk out. My path took me directly past Christian's table. He was still sitting there, shell-shocked, his billion-dollar empire crumbling around him. His lawyer, Sloan, was already stuffing papers into a briefcase, his face thunderous, no doubt calculating his own exit strategy from his toxic client. Christian looked up as I passed. His eyes, those blue eyes that had once melted glaciers and promised me the world, were now just the eyes of a terrified, defeated man. They were hollow, pleading. He said my name. Summer. It was a whisper. A plea for what? Mercy? Forgiveness? For me to stop this, to rewind time to when he was in control and I was the oblivious fool? I paused just for a second. I looked down at him, this architect of my humiliation, this man who had called me defective in a room full of strangers. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, not even the satisfaction of victory. Just emptiness. He was nothing. A ghost. I said nothing. I didn't give him the dignity of a single word. I simply turned my head and continued walking, my heels clicking a steady, unhurried rhythm on the marble floor as I walked out of the courtroom and into the blinding flashbulbs of my new life. 2 years passed. The name Morrison Investment Group was now a scar on the financial pages, a toxic asset, a whispered cautionary tale about the perils of arrogance and fraud. The penthouse, once my cold, beige prison, was now mine. I had exorcised Christian's ghost with color, with art that I loved, with comfortable furniture, and with the sound of my own laughter. The glass walls were no longer mirrors reflecting a prisoner. They were windows, and I had finally learned to enjoy the view. The company which I had seized in the divorce had been a bleeding wreck. Christian and Marcus, their reputations radioactive, had been ousted by the board in the immediate fallout. I heard they had moved to Portland, their partnership surviving the scandal even as their professional lives imploded. They were, in the end, each other's punishment. I had stepped in not as an events coordinator, but as the majority shareholder. I'd spent the first 6 months in a trial by fire, learning the language of finance with the same cold, methodical focus I'd used to destroy my husband. I rebranded the company, wiping the Morrison name from the letterhead. It was now Meridian Capital Partners. I hired a new CEO, a brilliant, sharp woman whom Christian would have despised, and together, we rebuilt the firm on a single, radical principle: transparency. And, in the ultimate irony, we were thriving. I had become the woman Christian had pretended I was, powerful, wealthy, and respected. But I had done it on my own terms. My new life was full, but it was guarded. I was a success story, but I was also a headline, a scandal. I trusted my instincts, I trusted my friends, and I trusted my balance sheets. Men were not on the list. Then, at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital, an event I was now sponsoring, not just attending as arm candy, I met Dr. James Mitchell. He was a pediatric surgeon with kind, tired eyes and a gentle smile that held no calculation. He wasn't impressed by my name or my penthouse. When we were introduced, he simply studied me for a moment. "Summer Morrison," he said, his voice warm. "I read about what you went through. I'm sorry." It was the first time a man had offered me compassion instead of congratulations. "I'm Summer, just Summer now," I corrected him. "And I survived." "You did more than that," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You rebuilt an empire. That must have taken, well, everything." "It did," I admitted. "We talked all night." He spoke about his work, about the small, fragile lives he held in his hands. He was a man who mended things, a healer. He was the antithesis of Christian in every conceivable way. He was divorced himself, his marriage a victim of his grueling, life-saving schedule. He was honest about his flaws, his exhaustion. There was no performance, no mask. Our relationship was slow, a cautious unfolding. It was built on late-night conversations after his surgeries, on quiet weekends in the Hamptons house that was now just mine. He was the first man I had ever felt truly safe with. He knew my story, he had seen my scars, and he loved me for the woman I had become because of them, not in spite of them. Which brought me to this morning. I was standing in my bathroom, the one I had retiled in warm, blue porcelain, the morning sun streaming in. James had just left for the hospital, kissing me goodbye, his touch gentle. I was 2 weeks late. I had dismissed it as stress. I was running a company, after all. But a small, persistent kernel of something had made me stop at the pharmacy. Now, I was staring at a small white plastic stick on the marble counter. 2 pink lines. Clear, sharp, and undeniable. My hands flew to my mouth. I gripped the counter, my knees suddenly weak. I was pregnant. The words Christian had used to condemn me, the labels he had tried to brand on my soul, echoed in my ears. Sterile. Defective. A fraudulent contract. He had built his entire strategy, his entire world, on the lie that I was broken. He had used my deepest desire, the desire for a child, as the weapon to destroy me. I looked at the test, and the tears that I had refused to shed in that courtroom, the tears of rage and humiliation I had locked away, finally came. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of vindication. Of release. Of a profound, staggering, and beautiful irony. Christian had tried to write my story, to cast me as the barren wife. He had tried to ensure my life would be empty, a hollow echo of his own. But his plan had failed. I had my freedom. I had the company. I had a man who was a good man. And I had a child. My child. I laughed, a real, trembling, joyous sound that filled the sunlit room. I walked out of the bathroom and over to the great glass windows. I looked out over Manhattan, no longer a reflection but the master of the view. I placed a hand on my still flat stomach, feeling the hum of the city, the thrum of a new, impossible life, and the absolute, unshakable certainty that the best revenge wasn't just living well. It was creating life from the ashes of a lie.